So, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent testified to Congress about an urgent need to extend Trump's 2017 individual tax cuts, saying that allowing them to expire at the end of this year would unleash a $4 trillion tax hike. Hold up. Let me get this straight. Not extending tax cuts equals a $4 trillion tax hike. I mean, that sounds terrifying. Except here's what he's not telling you. Budget forecasters estimate that extending those same cuts would increase US deficits by more than $4 trillion over 10 years. So preventing a $4 trillion increase costs $4 trillion. That's like me saying I saved $50,000 by not buying a boat, while I'm literally buying a $50,000 car. The money still leaves your account, genius. But wait, there's more. They've got a brilliant plan to pay for this fiscal sleight of hand. Tariffs. You know, those things that American consumers pay when they buy literally anything imported, which in case you haven't been to a store lately, is pretty much everything. So the plan is to fund the tax cuts by taxing ourselves every time we buy groceries, clothes, electronics, or basically participate in the modern economy. It's like funding your kids' college by charging them rent. Sure, the money moves around, but whose wallet is actually getting lighter? But here's the thing, this isn't the first lie about how they'll even pay for these tax cuts. Remember when they said economic growth would cover it? Yeah, that didn't work out. We didn't believe that. So now it's tariffs. One lie swapped for another. And stick around because we're going to break down exactly why this tariffs math is complete nonsense. How their 3% growth promises contradict tariff promises, why Truth Social has become the least truthful place to get economic news, and how the White House's new propaganda machine compares to actual presidential communications. Plus, we'll show you exactly how much more you'll be paying for everything while they figure out their next excuse. Because, spoiler alert, when the tariff revenue falls short, they'll need another story. What's the next lie going to be? Cryptocurrency? Prayer circles? A GoFundMe for the federal deficit? But let's first, of course, talk about how tariffs actually work, since apparently we need a remedial course. The US has ratcheted up tariffs on Chinese imports to 145% at one point, and guess what happened? China retaliated with 125% on our goods. So now when Company A in Ohio wants to import widgets from China, they pay that 145% tariff to the US Treasury, not China, the American company. Then, because companies aren't charities, they pass that cost directly to you, the consumer. So your widget that used to cost $10 now costs $24.50. Congratulations, you've just contributed to tariff revenue. Except now you have $14.50 less to spend on other things, which means less economic activity, which means less overall tax revenue from income taxes, sales taxes, and corporate profits. But it gets better. Remember those retaliatory tariffs? American farmers tried to export soybeans to China and now face 125% duties. So China buys from Brazil instead. American exports drop, trade value shrinks, and suddenly there's less tariff revenue than projected because there's less trade happening. It's like trying to fill a swimming pool by drilling holes in the bottom. Don't worry, says the pool guy. The water pressure will increase over time. No, Kevin, that's not how physics works, and that's not how economics works either. Meanwhile, Bessent is promising this will somehow generate enough revenue to cover a $4 trillion tax cut extension. The math is so bad it makes a carnival fortune teller look like a noble economist. Here's where the story gets truly magical. Bessent predicts the economy will be growing faster than 3% this time next year, through pro-growth trade policies, tax cuts, and deregulation. You know, the same policies that make everything more expensive for consumers. Let's walk through this logic together. Tariffs make imported goods more expensive. Americans spend more money on the same stuff they bought before. That leaves them with less money to spend on other things. Less consumer spending means businesses make less money. Less business revenue means fewer jobs and lower wages. But somehow this chain reaction is going to boost economic growth 3%? It's like saying you'll lose weight by eating more pizza because the pizza will motivate you to exercise more. The logic is so backwards, it could be a yoga pose. And remember, we're currently dealing with a 0.3% annualized contraction in the first quarter. So the plan to fix negative growth is to make everything more expensive for the people who drive economic growth through their spending. Bold strategy, Cobb. And here's the kicker. They used to say growth will pay for the tax cuts. Now it's tariffs will pay for the tax cuts. What's the next pivot when tariff revenues fall short? Thoughts and prayers will pay for the tax cuts? The growth fair will sprinkle magic dust on the deficit? It's like watching someone explain why their get-rich-quick scheme is totally different from a pyramid scheme. The excuses keep changing, but the math stays broken. Welcome to Besson's 3-3-3 approach, cutting the budget deficit to 3% of GDP, achieving 3% annual growth, and increasing domestic oil production by 3 million barrels per day. It's so neat, it's so symmetrical, so completely dependent on everything going perfectly. Here's the problem with interconnected economic promises. If any one piece fails, the whole thing collapses like a house of cards in a hurricane. You need the 3% growth to reduce the deficit to 3% of GDP, but you also need low consumer costs to achieve that growth. But tariffs raise consumer costs. So then you need the oil production increase to somehow offset the tariff-induced price increases, except oil production doesn't directly affect price of imported electronics, clothing, or the 1,000 other things subject to tariffs. It's like promising to juggle flaming torches while riding on a unicycle while solving calculus. Theoretically possible? Maybe. Likely to end well? Probably not. Should we bet the entire economy on it? That seems unwise. And if the 3% growth doesn't materialize because tariffs drag down consumer spending, well, then you don't get the deficit reduction either. If oil production doesn't hit targets because of regulatory delays or market conditions, the whole plan falls apart. But hey, at least the number 3 probably tested well in the focus groups, because nothing says serious economic policy like choosing round numbers that sound good in campaign ads. So where is this brilliant economic strategy being communicated to the American people? Truth Social, where else? The platform literally named Truth that serves as a 24/7 stream of whatever thoughts happen to be bouncing around on the presidential brain at any given moment. We've gone from FDR's fireside chats explaining complex economic policy in measured, thoughtful terms to getting trillion-dollar fiscal updates sandwiched between complaints about crowd sizes and media coverage. Tariffs will make America great again. Also, why was Diet Coke warm by lunch? Investigate. The deep state probably did it, but seriously, trade wars are easy to win and my economic plan is perfect. Many people are saying it. This is how we're communicating economic policy that affects 330 million Americans now. It's like gutting your investment advice from fortune cookies, except fortune cookies are at least trying to be wise and uplifted. Previous presidents had economic advisors draft carefully worded statements that went through multiple reviews before being released through official channels. Now we get stream of consciousness economic theory posted at 3 a.m. between complaints about late-night comedy shows. And the platform is called Truth Social. You already know. The irony is so thick, you could cut it with a butter knife and serve it at a White House dinner. Probably one of the ones that are $1 million. Though given the current messaging strategy, they'd probably announce the menu changes on Truth Social at 2 a.m. with a complaint about how mainstream media doesn't appreciate good food. But wait, we're not done. There's more. The White House has launched its own Drudge-style website to promote Trump as part of the administration's latest effort to circumvent the mainstream media and present itself in a positive light. Think about this for a second. Previous administrations dealt with unfavorable media coverage by improving policies, explaining their positions better, or accepting that just criticism just comes with that job, obviously. This administration's solution: create their own media outlet that only says nice things. It's like getting bad Yelp reviews for your restaurant and deciding that the solution is to create Chef Bob's Definitely Objective Reviews.com, where every review is 5 stars and written by your mom. The mainstream media won't report how great our tariff policy is. Maybe because making people pay more for everything isn't actually great. Maybe because the math doesn't work. Maybe because economists who aren't on the payroll have some concerns. When you need your own truth platform and your own news website to explain why your policies are good, maybe the problem isn't the media. Maybe the problem is that your policies are so bad and the explanations don't make any sense. It's like the old saying, if you run into one asshole, you ran into an asshole. If everyone you meet is an asshole, you're the asshole. Except here it's, if one news outlet criticizes your policy, maybe they're biased. If every credible news outlet criticized your policy, maybe your policy just sucks. Here's what all this economic masterminding actually means for real human beings with real budgets trying to live real lives. You're going to pay more for stuff. All the stuff. The stuff you need, the stuff you want, and the stuff you didn't even know was imported until the price tag made you question your life choices. Your phone cases, your kid's backpack, your coffee maker, your winter coat, all more expensive thanks to tariffs. But don't worry, you might get a tax cut, assuming the tariffs generate enough revenue to pay for it, which they won't, because, basic economics. So you'll definitely pay more at the store to maybe, possibly, theoretically, pay less in taxes. It's like being told you can save money on your mortgage by paying double rent. The math doesn't math, but hey, at least someone's getting rich off the transaction. Meanwhile, the promised 3% economic growth will be tough to achieve when everyone's spending more money on the same stuff they bought last year. Consumer spending drives about 70% of the US economy. When consumers have less money to spend because tariffs are eating their budgets, economic growth slows down, not speeds up. The Treasury Secretary can testify to Congress all he wants. The White House can launch 100 propaganda websites, Truth Social can host 1,000 posts about how everything is so great. But your grocery receipt doesn't lie. Your credit card statement doesn't spin. Your bank account doesn't care about messaging strategy. When everything costs more and the promised growth doesn't materialize, when the tariff revenue falls short and the deficit keeps growing, when the 3-3-3 plan becomes the 0-0-0 reality, remember this moment. Remember they had all the numbers in front of them, all the economic research available, all the historical examples of how tariffs actually work, and they chose to ignore it all because the truth doesn't pull as well as a good story. Because admitting that there's no magic solution to fiscal policy doesn't get likes on Truth Social. Because explaining that economic growth requires actual economic fundamentals, not just wishful thinking and creative accounting, doesn't fit in a tweet. And the math was always there, it didn't go anywhere. The choice is to ignore it? That's on them. The bill for ignoring it, that is on us.